Kind of funny how my ringtone is Paranoid Android, which is a song named after one of the characters in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You can laugh now. I would like to point out two things about the film adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy for those that are unsure about this film because of its reception, especially by the fans. First and most importantly, Douglas Adams is one of the screenwriters for this film. So any changes that were made for this film that are much different from the television miniseries adaptation, you can sort of put the blame on Douglas Adams for making those changes for the film. Although I don't take it against him for making changes for the film because of reasons. And secondly, this is more of an update on the story. This isn't really like a shot-for-shot, like, faithful retelling of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So yes, obviously this film will play out differently from previous incarnations. The reason I wanted to bring it up first is because the budget towards the film adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is obviously much higher than the television miniseries years ago, which were obviously low budget, which I consider to be one of the charms of that television miniseries. Now sure, that charm is not even in the film adaptation, but I actually don't mind a higher budget towards this film in particular, so there's really nothing wrong with special effects or visual effects towards the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy film. And I must praise the effects department towards the film adaptation because the effects done by computer are only done when necessary. Most of the effects that were used for this film were mostly practical. For a film that was released in 2005, I give the effects team major props for focusing more on practical effects instead of excessively using digital effects. Now, hear me out. I'm not totally against digital effects. I just hate it when they decide to take a cheap route and just decide, hey, we're just going to create digital effects because we can't take the time to focus on practical effects. My philosophy towards visual effects in film goes like this. If something can be made through organic means, depending on what it is, I hope they do it. But if it's impossible to do by organic means and they have to make it convincing, then go for digital. I am totally fine with mixing the two whenever needed. It really depends on the film, and some films do require digital effects. The only part of the film's overall design that I'm not particularly the biggest fan of is the design of Marvin the Paranoid Android. Now I can understand why Marvin the Paranoid Android was updated in terms of overall design. Personally, I don't think his design stands out in this film.
I think you ought to know I'm feeling very depressed.
The film score was composed by Joby Tabot, and I really don't have a lot to say about the film score of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It is one of those film scores that's really not worth talking about because I do think the film score of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is decent. It works for the film, it's just I don't have much to say about it. There is one other thing I want to point out about the music in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy film. It has Journey of the Sorcerer in it. When it comes to the overall acting, this is actually one of the issues I have with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy film. Now, the cast is not at fault. I blame part of this on direction. Now, I can understand why the actors from the original radio series as well as the television miniseries did not come back to reprise their roles in this film, because they obviously got older and it would be kind of awkward and a little disorienting to see older actors play the same characters years later. So I can understand why the cast is completely different in this film. However, as much as I like Martin Freeman as an actor, I have to admit his portrayal of Arthur Dent makes the character a bit more restrained when compared to previous incarnations. Now, I know it's kind of a little unfair for me to compare one actor to another when it comes to an adaptation like this, but I'm sorry. As much as I like Martin Freeman in this film, I have to admit he doesn't really suit the character too well for me to actually connect to him. Another actor that I find to be just as restrained as Martin Freeman was Mos Def as Ford Prefect. Now, I don't mind the casting choice for Ford Prefect for this film, but I really didn't see the character in Ford Prefect as much as previous incarnations. Sam Rockwell was a very good choice as Zaphod Beeblebrox, although the direction of his performance makes him more douchey than previous incarnations. Say what you will about Zooey Deschanel as Trillian, I found her kind of boring. If there's one actor that I do think is a bit of a miscast, it is Bill Nye as Slaughter Bartfast. I just didn't find his performance that convincing as the character. John Malkovich was a nice addition, but I really don't have much to say about his performance in this film. Blame the improbability drive as to why I didn't have a towel on me in certain takes. Now, if there's one actor in this film that was spot on for the character, but the direction to the performance of the character was not, it would be the late Alan Rickman as the voice of Marvin the Paranoid Android. I really enjoyed Alan Rickman in this film, but I had to be really honest with you, I do think the direction towards his performance as Marvin does feel a bit tacked on when it comes to Marvin's personality. Now, you can blame me for really liking the radio series and television miniseries for this, but when Marvin expresses his depression, for some reason it's funny in the previous iterations. Alan Rickman was a good choice for Marvin, but whenever he expresses depression, I don't find it funny. It just feels tacked on.
Just that. I won't enjoy it.
Yeah, well, that's life.
Life? Don't talk to me about life.
Did I say something wrong? Pardon me for breathing, which I never do anyway, so I don't know why I bother to say it. Oh God, I'm so depressed. Here's another one of those self-satisfied doors. Life. Don't talk to me about life.
Other than that, I really had no issue with Alan Rickman as Marvin the Paranoid Android, and may Alan Rickman rest in peace. When it comes to the characters, the main characters have not changed much, but the film-exclusive characters really did not add much to the film, so say what you will. The plot to the film adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is easily the most underwhelming part about this film. And even though this film does get some things right from previous iterations, I do feel like as the film goes on, it kind of loses its charm. There is a subplot in the second act of the film, and I can tell that it is exclusive to the film adaptation, and I don't think it adds up to the story whatsoever. Now, there is also a subplot involving the Vogons near the end of the film, and obviously in the third act, that didn't really get touched upon in previous iterations of the story of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now, I can understand if Douglas Adams made some liberties in the story writing regarding the screenplay, but in the long run, I don't think the story to the film adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy makes the experience complete. Douglas Adams unfortunately passed away in 2001, which was 4 years before this film came out. Now, even though I have some issues here and there with the film adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I don't intend to diss Douglas Adams for making changes to the screenplay of the film adaptation of his work. I can understand if he had to make changes here and there in order to fit in everything that he believes would work as a film adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Regardless of the changes that Douglas Adams made for the screenplay of the film adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I can't help but think that the original radio series and the television miniseries adaptation feel more complete than what this film offered. Overall, even with my nitpicks of the film adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I actually recommend this film because it's a more accessible version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Either that or start with the book of the same name, because either way, it's a good introduction to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The reason I am not recommending to start with the original radio series or the television miniseries at first is because it may take a little getting used to for the listener or viewer, so I just wanted to point that out. I still enjoyed this film, even if it is the inferior version of Douglas Adams' magnum opus. I am going to give the film adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy a 7.5. If you like this review, feel free to hit the like button, and if you want to follow my channel, please feel free to hit the subscribe button. And as always, you're welcome to leave me a comment if you feel so inclined. And thank you for watching my review of the film adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I will see you in the next review.
Lie back and let the planet dissolve around you. Despite those nets of tuna feet, we thought that most of you were sweet, especially tiny tots and your pregnant women. So long, so long, so long, so long, so long. So long, so long, so long, so long, so long. So long, so long, and thanks for all the fish.
I think you ought to know I'm feeling very depressed.
Oh, God.